Servus Männer, it's Red Pill Germany again. Today I want to report to you about a very problematic process that is happening in Germany right now. A really scary development in my opinion, but I have the suspicion that once again this is not something that is unique for Germany. Maybe in this way or in a little bit of a different way it is also happening in other so-called Western countries. The story that I'm talking about is that a family court judge is being harassed now by the authorities, by the German legal system in the city of Weimar. This judge ruled against certain health measures at public schools. In today's video, I want to explain to you what this case is all about, what this judge ruled, what the question was, and how the authorities responded to it then. I am of course not a lawyer and I'm not a legal expert, but I can read and translate to you what I have read in the German media from several sources. And I also have some common knowledge about the German legal system, of course. And in legal matters, there is such a thing as precedent, of course. So based on that, I want to make some personal judgment calls and give you my personal opinions about how I think the authorities are acting here. But before we go into it, I want to thank once again all my supporters and all my subscribers. If you like this information from the heart of Europe, like, share and subscribe, but especially make sure to subscribe also on alt tech platforms. If you want to support my work, you can do so directly via PayPal or use Patreon or Subscribestar. Okay, so I want to briefly tell you what has happened in Weimar. As you might know from my previous videos or from other sources, of course, there are several measures and rules that our authorities and now even the federal government introduced, and some of them are affecting schools, of course. I told you in previous videos, for example, that from a 7-day incidence of 156, I believe, onwards, schools will be closed. But while classes are in session in schools, of course, there are also some rules. For example, social distancing and masks and daily tests. And this is exactly what this judge in Weimar has ruled should not be the case at 2 schools that were concerned in his work at least. So I have read that he has ruled that all these measures should not be done anymore in the best interest of the children in 2 schools in the city of Weimar. That is what he did. He based this judgment on the expert opinion of independent scientists. They said that children and schools are not a major driver of the infection, and that is why all these measures are absolutely not necessary and they are harmful to children. This ruling got a lot of attention and a lot of positive feedback in the German public. But now, as I said, this judge is facing accusations from the side of our government and the administration. They say that he overstepped his boundaries, that this was not the sphere of his competence as a family judge, but he should have referred this case to an administrative court. And in order to intimidate him and to criminalize him, they raided his office and even his private home and confiscated his property. That is, of course, the typical enemy of the state treatment that many people who speak up are receiving from our regime currently. So as I said, I am not a legal expert, but fortunately there are legal experts. There is the network Christa, I think it's called, like critical judges and DAs or prosecutors, that this judge was not acting out of line whatsoever and that he was the judge, or the family court was the court that is responsible for cases like that, which is, well, I am almost shocked. That is what common sense would tell you. Common sense would tell you that if the well-being of children is affected, then yes, the family courts are exactly the courts who should deal with these questions and not some administrative court. Their line of argumentation was that yes, the family courts would be responsible for ruling in a way that affects private citizens when it's about the well-being of children or of families, but now in this case, the ruling affects organs of the state or public institutions like schools, for example, and that is then not their area of expertise, which is absolutely wrong. There is a long history, there is meters and meters of paperwork in precedents that is exactly cases where the family courts did tell clinics or daycare facilities or schools to do XY or to stop doing XY if it was violating the well-being of families and children. So that is absolutely wrong. And even I can see that when I'm not a legal expert. That is just what precedent tells us. This is what the experts are saying, and this is what is obviously demonstrably true. So if there is some weird obscure reason why this judge acted out of line, then the authorities should present something that is at least true and not something that's made up. So let me conclude with a couple of comments on the German legal system in general. Our judges are normally employed for lifetime, like other officers of the state too. The idea is, of course, that they should be independent and that they cannot be bribed and that they don't work for some kind of administration, but they're appointed on merit and then they will serve as a judge for their active professional lifetime. That still means that they're appointed by someone, and that is normally a political question, and it depends on what party you are a member of or what your values or what your ideology is still. But the DAs, the prosecutors, that's a whole different ballgame. They are not independent at all. The prosecutors are directly controlled by politicians. If a politician tells a DA not to go after a certain group or to drop a certain case, they will do that. If a politician tells a DA to open a certain case or go after a certain individual or a certain group, guess what? That is exactly what they will do. And sometimes, they have to obey their orders and they have to become creative. And sometimes the law just doesn't justify going after someone, but they still have to do it because they're ordered to do it. And that is something you really need to know about the German legal system. It is absolutely corrupt. The assumption is, of course, that the local politicians would respect the law and not use the prosecutor's office as a tool to intimidate their political opponents. But this is exactly what is the case in Germany. Let's just say our system was built for fair weather democracy, let's say, where everybody more or less would play by the rules and where the density of despicable and disgusting people is very, very low. But we all know that this is, of course, not the case these days. And by the way, let me put it into perspective or say it in a different way. The question that needs to be solved in this case is, what is taking priority here? The well-being of children or this health scare that we have at the moment? What is more important? Because there is clearly a conflict of interest. Everybody can tell that, yes, you can have all these rules and you can lock people up and put masks on them and tell them to stay at home and test them every second. But that is clearly not in the interest of our children. That clearly does some harm to them psychologically or in their development or professionally, academically, whatever. There is no doubt that this is harming our youth, but we have to decide where to drop the line. And the answer is not as simple as to just say, oh, this family court is intrinsically not responsible. It is this administrative court that we have in our pocket. So they want to solve this question by some technicality and just cry foul that this judge was not responsible in this case. They want to get out of it on a technicality and not solve this complex or fundamental question. The authorities and also our executive, they are clearly thinking that they can just enact any rule they want and people must obey, and that is how we're getting through this crisis. That is not the case. Clearly, it is not working. So I said it many times before and I should say it again. I think this was never about health, This was never about combating a disease. They have another agenda that they just want to get through. They want to get it passed, using this as an excuse and using the fear of the population in order to get things done that they have on their bucket list from above. So of course, judges in Germany are generally left-winged and are anti-German as a rule. So it is very nice to see that in Thuringia there is at least one judge that is not anti-German, anti-people, like most of them are, I think. But here you see what happens to one that actually dares to rule in favor of the people and against our globalist regime in Germany. His apartment gets raided and his property gets confiscated and he gets treated like a criminal. Alright, let me know if something like that happened in your country or how the situation is there. As always, I'm keen on getting to know that this way. Take care, Servus, Kameraden.